And it's working, live and working.
Yay.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. It's so fun to have you here today. We have a good showing, so that's exciting. Ready, full of people ready to talk about reading.
That's right.
So, woohoo.
I think
Take
my
it away,
husband's
Brandy.
like, you're getting together with people to talk about what you're going to read. Yeah.
These are our people.
Some people just don't understand.
It's always more fun to talk about plans.
Okay. Why don't we have everyone introduce themselves really? Okay.
Let's make sure everyone can see and hear us. Can everyone see and hear us? Yes. Thumbs up.
There's always a little bit of a delay.
Okay. Good.
So,
all right. Okay. Yes. All right. We're good. Now we're good. I was just. The comments were not reflecting that we were live, so.
Oh, they just don't care. They're having their own meeting.
They're also talking about books. So, okay, good. So introductions?
Yes, introductions. I'll just go ahead and start. My name is Brandy Wenzel. I am one of the three hosts of the Scully Sisters podcast, where we talk about reading widely, thinking deeply, and applying faithfully. So we do actually want to not just read the books, but eventually live out the truths we learn. But reading comes first, because you can't live out what you don't know. So anyway, I'm a longtime homeschool mom. My oldest is 20, my youngest is 14, and they've always been homeschooled, and I like to read. Who wants to go next?
I'm Abby Wall, and I am mother of 5 children, and currently I'm homeschooling 3 of them. One has graduated, and one is going to a private Christian school this year, and got a big black eye from her basketball game last night, so that was
awesome.
Fun. And I love to read also, but I am in charge of kind of the sistership. So you will see me putting in questions and putting in articles and different things. And I love the online community because I live very rurally. So it's really nice to know that there are readers out there and people who love homeschooling and reading and Scully out there with me. So.
And I'm Misty Winkler. I have 5 kids, 2 of whom are graduated. So homeschooling 3 now. And I also, in addition to doing Scully Sisters, I have Simply Convivial, where we talk about planning and homemaking and managing our attitudes while we manage home.
You have to. All right.
So I guess I'm next
to
introduce you to the 5x5 challenge, because the 5x5 challenge is my fault.
That's right.
I made it up. I made it up for myself, actually. I was, was it 4 or 5 years ago now? Yeah. It was early December or late November, sometime in that after Christmas or after Thanksgiving, before Christmas time, where it's like, okay, time to call it quits on this year and think about how awesome next year is going to be.
That's right. Skip the finishing part.
Where I'm going to totally up my game on everything. And one of the things that was really bothering me that year was how many books I owned that I did not read. So I was great at buying books, and I bought more books than I read, which I've kind of come to terms with. And I'm not sure that has to be considered a problem.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
But I think a part of the problem is we'd rearranged the living room so that the bookshelves were in front of me at the dining room table. So when I sat down to dinner every day, I would look at my bookshelves, and I felt like apologizing to all my books. But I do want to read you.
Hilarious.
So I was like, I need to make a plan for reading, to read more of those books that I've bought. And one of the things I noticed as I was staring at my bookshelves during dinner was that I kept buying books in certain genres or about certain topics. And I would buy books on a certain topic or go on a spree where I like buy 3 on a certain topic and then not read them. Or there were topics like history or theology where I was always collecting books, but not necessarily reading in that category. But the fact that I was buying them proved that I was interested in it, right? But then my action of what I was reading didn't match. So it's like, which is my real interest? Why do I keep buying books in this category and not reading them? And so I decided, well, I was buying them because I do want to know more in that area. Yeah. So I decided, well, I have all these different topics I keep buying books about. I'm going to read 5 books and then to make it match in 5 categories. And I very quickly came up with, well, I'm always buying theology books and history books and philosophy books and education books. And then actually I should probably also be reading literature or fiction and not just be a total nerd. So
not that there's anything
but
wrong
she
with
is, ladies and gentlemen.
So it kind of harkens back to the kind of a summary of what I've always said my dad's approach to lifelong learning was, that he instilled in us as with a library habit when I was a kid, because I was homeschooled growing up. So if you want to know about something, you go to the library and get 5 books on it. So the number 5 also kind of reminded me of that little saying that I had extrapolated from my dad's behavior. And so I made up a 5x5 challenge for myself and then thought, well, maybe I'll tell people about it. And I told Brandy and Abby, and like, actually, this needs to be a Scully Sisters thing. Mm-hmm. And now it is. And it's so much more fun with everyone doing it.
Yeah, so true. Yeah. Well, we were already saying read widely was one of our big things. So when you said it, I was like, well, how much more perfect could you get? It's like the perfect challenge for what we're trying to be about here. So, so how it works, I think you already said it, but just to be really, really clear, because there has been some misunderstanding. It's 5 categories. You pick 5 different categories. They can be really, really specific, like very, very narrow. Like some people choose one author or something, or they can be really broad. Like I have a category I do basically every year that's like government, econ, politics. It's kind of like that whole
big thing. Surprise.
Right. It shocks Abby every year that I do this. Right. So but you pick 5 books in that one category. So it's 25 books. I don't know. There were some misunderstandings earlier. So I just want to make sure we're really clear. We're not asking you to read like 125 books because then we would all die. We do want you to do the dishes.
Well, our children would probably die of neglect and not being fed.
That's true. You know. That's true. They'd all starve to death because mom quit making dinner.
To read. Which has never happened in my house.
Right. I don't believe that. Okay, so Misty, is this right that they can fill out this?
Actually, I changed this link down below, so it actually will just give you the PDF as soon as you click this button.
Okay.
This button just gets you the PDF right away.
Okay, nice. Good. So you can use this to get the forms that we're going to talk about later. And just so we're clear, we actually developed a whole journal. So these forms, I just was noticing the directions say like, they keep referencing the journal. It's because these forms, we pulled them out of the journal. But there is a larger thing that you could get to. So our directions may seem a little strange, but it's just because we just pulled it straight out of that. So I'm sure Haley will drop you a link to the journal later. The journal is a way of actually managing. If you want to think deeply and work on application of these 25 books that you're going to read, it has a place not only to put your plan, but then it has like these guided note-taking type pages to help you think through it and learn to review a book beyond just your subjective, I like it, don't like it, that kind of thing. Anyway, I don't want to belabor that. I mainly was thinking the directions sounded weird. So anyway, okay. So with that said, why should I do a 5x5, Misty? If I'm like, but why do I need to do this? What do you say?
The 5x5 challenge, I think it helps us to read broadly. So not just to get sucked into reading one kind of book, one genre, one author, or, one topic. So we diversify. And a lot of times people will pick one of their 5 categories to be something that's kind of stretching or out of the norm, something to help you read different kinds of books than you would just pick up by whim. So it helps you get out of only whim. There's nothing wrong with reading by whim. There should be some of that. But if our reading is going to help us learn and grow, there needs to be some stretching beyond what's our normal defaults. And then having 5 in one topic helps you go deep in the topic, so that you're not just getting one author's perspective and running with that as if that's the be all end all, or now you know everything about it. It helps you get a breadth of knowledge, so widely is breadth, depth of knowledge in the topic. And so you get both of those together, but it's only 25 books, because I know my tendency is to make a huge goal that, I'm going to read 50 books or 100 books and not think it really matters or counts or is good enough if it isn't a really big number. And the fact was, the year before I did the 5x5 challenge, when I tallied it up and just leaving it to myself to read as I wanted to, I finished fewer than 20 books that year.
Really interesting. So you're actually reading more.
I was reading more. Yeah. And so 25 is a book every other week rather than a book a week or more. And the 5x5 part of it helps us to see that it doesn't take reading a huge number of books to get both breadth and depth. We can do that with just 25.
That's a really good point. I hadn't even thought about it that way, but it's true, because we tend to think, well, I have to read 100 books on this subject in order to know what I'm talking about. Maybe we should add, though, doing well-chosen books helps too.
Right. Well, and that's when you're narrowing it down and saying it's just 25, you don't really have space for junk. You want to make it count.
Yes. Which quality reading lists help a lot when it comes to wanting to do the growth part. So, okay, are you ready?
Hold on, though. But for those of you who 25 seems like a lot, we have options for you too. We can talk more about that, because sometimes you're out of the habit of reading, or you never really fell in love with reading. And so, but you want to be a reader, and 25 books seems like a lot. So that's okay too, because we can help you with that. Because 25 good books in a year is nothing to sneeze at. That is a great goal to have.
We have a form for a 3x5, right?
A 3x3.
3x3. That's right. 3x3. That's right. We were envisioning, like if you had a baby this year, it might be the year for a 3x3. Depending on how difficult that newborn is. All right. Are we ready for some philosophy?
Go for it, Brandy. Okay. Take it away.
Gathered my supplies. I have printed my quotes all on one page so I don't lose them. All right. So we have a couple things. First, we are going to pay homage to Charlotte Mason, because Misty loves me to do that. Okay. So if you're not familiar with Charlotte Mason, she was an educational philosopher in the late 1800s, early 1900s, from England. And one of her things was actually wide reading. And she was mainly talking about how we educate our children. But I feel like, well, I want to be a more educated person. To the extent that she's talking about the education of humans, I'm a human. I would like to know how to become more educated. So one of the things she talks about is not getting too specialized. And because she sees it as really, there are different subjects, but they're way more connected than we think. And so lots of times our thinking is actually enhanced by crossover, right? But she even goes further back just to creation. And she talks about how you're a human. You are created by the God who made everything. And you are designed to have relationships with his creation. So yes, we're fallen. Yes, all of that was broken in the fall, which is why we have to actually read and study, right? We're not born now naturally into having all those relationships. They have to be more cultivated than they would have to be in, say, an ideal world where you get to live forever and just keep gaining your knowledge as you go, right? So she was very much into having multiple types of categories, though she didn't call them categories, but it really had to do with developing your own humanity. I'm not supposed to just have relationships with my favorite thing, but God made this whole world that I'm supposed to enjoy, right? And so this is part of cultivating that. The other thing that was talked about in her magazine, there was an article called Mother Culture, not written by her. In fact, no one knows who wrote it because she just said her initial letter A. So we just know it wasn't Charlotte Mason. But she talked about something called Mother Culture, and she talked about mothers specifically keeping a few books going at all times. And the reason for that was basically because as our children grow, we don't want them to outgrow us, or we don't want to outgrow the ability to be a fit advisor and friend for them. Because as like the advice that we give a 5-year-old isn't going to be the advice that we give a 20-year-old, right? But if you think about it, like if I have my child at 24, I need to be fit in a different way at 44 to give advice, because now I'm advising a 20-year-old man, right? This is my actual life right now. So it's like, goodness, I'm thankful I kept reading, because turns out my 24-year-old self wouldn't have been a great advisor for this person. Right?
Is a 24-year-old a good advisor for
anybody? I mean, maybe a 3-year-old, right? So
oh yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, so I really grabbed hold of that like, this is why I can't just read sci-fi all day, right? Because that is something I would probably like doing. But it's because that alone doesn't really fit me to be a good advisor for my children, to be a fit counselor for them as they're growing and they're launching and all that kind of stuff. So this intellectual development is for me, and it's for my relationship with the world around me. But it's not just for me. It's actually so I can better serve the people that God has brought into my life, right? So those are my Charlotte Mason quotes. She did have a place where she quoted Matthew Arnold, who was a classical scholar at the time. And I love this quote from him. So she says, Dr. Arnold advises us, adjust your proposed amount of reading to your time and inclination. But whether that amount be large or small, let it be varied in its kind and widely varied. If I have a confident opinion on any one point connected with the improvement of the human mind, it is on this. And then she follows up by saying, here we get support for a varied curriculum. And as a matter of fact, we find that the pupil who studies a number of subjects knows them as well as he who studies only a few. So my next thing is, we actually did a whole podcast on this long time ago. Oh my goodness. I was looking back. It's been a really long time now. But it's on the Latin, I guess it's a motto called multum non multa, which is a phrase that was pulled from a letter that a guy named Pliny the Younger wrote to another guy whose name I'm not sure I'm pronouncing right, but it looks like Fuscus or Fuscus or something like that, or Fuscus. I don't know. Now it's sounding like a pasta. Anyway, so this guy had written to Pliny the Younger and asked for advice on organizing his reading list. It sounds like he's in the countryside. Maybe he's in retirement. I'm not quite clear, but definitely he had said, like, Pliny knows how I should be going about these things. So Pliny writes him a letter, and some of it is even on learning to be a better writer. So he's got advice on how to learn to write. But in the context of this, he also talks about organizing his reading. So he says, you asked me how I think you ought to arrange your studies in the retirement you have long been enjoying. And so then he starts talking about this idea of varying your subjects. And he says, just as our fields gather fresh strength from a change and variety in the crops we sow, so our minds are refreshed by change and variety of study. He goes on later and he says, You must bear in mind to choose carefully authors of all styles, for there is an old proverb that a man should read much, but not read a multitude of books. Who those authors are is too well known and approved to need further explanation. And besides, I've let this letter run to such unconscionable length that while advising you how you ought to study, I've robbed you of time to study. I just included that because that was funny. That's what we're doing right now. We're robbing you of time to study. Anyway, what I loved was he was talking about this idea of like, you're actually refreshing the fields. We don't realize how switching subjects, thinking about something else, actually brings us back to our favorite things, more renewed for it than ever. And so all these things kind of work synergistically to develop the human mind and soul. And really, so I put on Instagram, I don't know for any of you who saw my story last night, I said, I really do think that a challenge like this, it stretches us and it grows us. Like, we are not the same at the end of the year as when we started because of the way that it's developed. And it's not that reading our favorite things is bad. I definitely actually dropped a whole category this year so that I could read more of my favorite things because I felt like I was just overwhelmed by life and needed to just like have it more of like a resting posture. But it is true. Like, this is how we grow as persons.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the non-multa. I use flags, the colored flags. Oh, I have some right here when I'm reading. And for the Great Tradition, which I still have not finished. There's a whole group of people in sistership that read it in a year, but I think I started it 6 years ago and I'm still not done. I've gone through whole years where I haven't picked it up, but I use colored flags while I read and tag. I have a color that's multa, non-multa.
Ooh.
If I said
this
that
is
right.
why it's taking her a decade.
This is why
to
it's
read
taking me so long. It's true. It's because I'm color coding as I read.
Some people just read the book, Misty.
Yeah.
Maybe a little underlining.
And then they finish it. But but it's interesting because it does come up with multiple authors that say, like, the phrase and it being a classical motto is usually referred back to that letter.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a consistent theme where people are starting to put together book lists as the amount of books grows. It becomes an issue in education and, just copying books. And the concern is that you read the books that matter and you don't feel responsible for reading all the books. So to be educated, you don't have to read every single author who's ever written on the topic in order to know about the topic. You pick a few of the best and read those.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which is why waiting a couple years after books come out can be handy, because you don't really know if it's the best until a bunch of those people who are early adopters have read it and told you whether or not it was worthwhile. Saves you a lot of time. Somebody has to be the early adopter, but I'm glad that it's not me. All I can say. Yes. Okay. Did you have some sort of testimonial here?
Right.
Misty?
Next are testimonials about, like, what benefit have we seen from doing the 5x5 challenge. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my own testimony, this of finishing several years in a row. And then Abby is also going to share some testimonials from finishers.
Because we want you to finish, not just start.
Yes. This is the time of year where we start everything, but we really will cycle back in December. And we just did to talk about finishing. Mm-hmm. We have a little finisher pin. Oh, I don't have mine yet, but Abby
here, let me get it. Yeah, here we go. Sorry.
So you get a pin when you finish.
It came out great.
Yeah, they look great. They look really good.
And so it's just a little marker and prize, a little celebration to say, hey, I did that thing and it matters. It's like for the whole community to say, yes, this does matter. And the survey that you fill out to get that pin at the end, asks you to share, what categories you picked, what were your favorite books, but also what did you learn through the process, and how did the challenge help you? Because actually stopping at the end of something and thinking back and putting into words how working through something affected you helps you to do it again, and to do it again better, to iterate, to practice, and really own those changes instead of just letting the years roll by and not really remembering or noticing the growth that's happening. More growth is going to happen when you notice the growth that has happened. So taking the time to recognize the growth and the benefits and what has worked and what hasn't worked really does make a difference. So for me, one of the things I've noticed with doing the 5x5 challenge is that it has pushed me to actually finish books, where I would get about halfway through or a quarter through and think, well, I'm fine, especially on topics where it's not my most favorite topic, where I'm just reading compulsively. But last year, Marxism was a topic that we had. And I would have said by the third book on Marxism, it's halfway through, I'm like, yeah, okay, I think I've got this. I'm done. But actually,
now you're an expert.
Exactly. Let me just tell you all.
That's how she starts conversations now. Let me tell you about how that's Marxist.
Yeah. It's a real problem.
It's I have a little red flag, a little beeping alarm system. Oh, that's Marxist. But going to the actual end of the book, did you know that authors often put their conclusions at the end of the book?
Weird.
So it really helps to finish them. Actually, you get more out of the book when you read the end of it. So it's helped me to finish books and not just start a lot of books. And then it has helped me to pick and read in categories that I otherwise wouldn't. With the Marxism, again, I would have read the books that we did for our mentorship and just called it good and thought that was fine. But actually rounding out that category with the other options did inform my understanding of the Communist Manifesto and everything else that we were reading. It really did. The 5-book aspect of it really helped my understanding and the connections, and it worked. I don't know.
Yeah, I had never read Animal Farm before this. And so to finish out my category, I finished Animal Farm, and I was like, I understand so much more of this because of all these things.
Yeah.
All right, Abby, what are some things other people have said this year?
Yes, I did want to say one thing that I did too is I never put our studies on our 5x5 until this year, because I'm going to do it, because I'm like, oh, I'm going to read those anyway, so I don't need to count them. And they end up taking so much of my time because we do such an in-depth study that I actually did need to put them. I needed to remove a category and put those in because they really did take a lot of our time. Yeah. So I have one from Malin's Graph, and she talks about her favorite category. So she said, what was your favorite categories? And this is hilarious that this is the one I chose. Marxism. It gave me a better understanding of what's going on in our current culture, how we got here, and what are some things we can do to fight against it. What did you learn? I actually have time to read. And reading gives me something to think about when I'm doing chores and something to talk about when I have the chance to have an adult conversation. And I felt like this one was perfect and spot on. What surprised you? If I read too many nonfiction books at a time or in a row, even if they were easy reads, I started to feel like reading was a chore. So I love that point too, because so much of our reading lists need to be varied. We need to have some fiction and some literature on our lists because it does need to break up that. And overwhelmingly, everyone said that they were going to participate again. And I'll see if I can't find one more. I'm on my phone because this computer does not have the app that we do all these things. Oh, yes. Okay. So what surprised you? Okay, here we go. This is from Lauren Scott. So, and she always has good insights in sistership too. So, this is her favorite combo, and rather than a single category, she had a couple of different ones that played off it. She loved all the excellent marksmanship reading, but also found it helpful to read a good bit of African American history and church history and current issues from reputable Black Christian authors. She said that there was a lot of things that just crossed over and helped with that. I feel like I'm better armed for understanding and navigating our current cultural problems and discussion because of both of these categories. Having one but not the other would be, as I see it now, and what I know from history and the current reaction machine, potentially sad or dangerous or both. So, and she's learning to set reading intentions at the weekly level, not just on the monthly level. And I'll talk more about that. She's also surprised by, I read the same number of books last year, and I think I was telling myself that I didn't need to read that many this year, and I needed to write more. So she just laughed about that. So, and she likes to do what's called a reverse outline method, having categories in mind, but mostly just reading what I need and want to learn, and then seeing how it organizes itself as I go. She felt less pressure by doing it this way. So, there's a few other things, but just overwhelmingly, people loved the studies that we did, the excellent marksmanship. And right now we're doing Tectonic, which is about screen use and things like that. So we're reading really great books for that as well. And other people talked about how they love the whimsical reading and enjoyed children's biography as a stepping stone to delve into for life, right? So we've had a lot of different interesting categories. That person, Sophia Espana, she read a bunch of like landmark books, which are, kids, but well-written, things like that. Yes.
Dawn says, oh, we can do the reverse method. I did that one time and Misty got onto me. I just want to say I got in trouble.
You can't, Brandy, but
what I did was I took a picture of all these books laid out and I was like, what do they want to be? And Misty was like, no. I was like, so I put in my earplugs and went ahead. Okay. Jill just said she needs category ideas. And it just dawned on me, I meant to put a place in our outline for this morning where you guys actually shared what you were doing for this year. And I forgot.
Okay.
So do you guys happen to, you are muted, Misty.
Yeah, I can't hear you.
I can't hear you. You're muted.
Oh, I'm muted.
There we go.
Sorry.
So whatever you said was really interesting.
So I just added a section in our outline that starts right now.
Oh, good.
There are some great Q&As. And I thought we'd take a minute to answer some of those and then move into our tips.
Okay.
So, and one of them is the categories.
Okay, great.
So, let's move through a few because some of these are really fast. Okay. And these are related. This jumps right in from where we are. So audiobooks count. Yes. Everyone needs to know that. Audiobooks count as reading. Someone asked, is it easier to go deep into each category and then wide, or wide first? So are there any rules or tips or ideas about reading your whole one whole category before moving on to the next? Or do you for sure never, have two in one category going? Do you go across your categories?
I'm a
And-
total rebel, so no, none of those things.
I have like 12 books going at a time.
Yeah, I read randomly, and I have things on my phone, like on a Kindle. I have things like audio going. I probably have a couple books of audio going, and then I always have a couple physical books. So, and oftentimes I will finish a whole category because it's interesting and and it's a favorite book or something like that. And others take me a lot longer. So no, there are. Go ahead.
The one time I got confused was when I was reading two. It was like I had a read aloud going that was really similar to a book in my literature category, and I kept getting them confused. And I usually can keep a number of storylines straight, but it was because they were in the same historical period. Like they were both kind of historical fiction, and I really got and we were reading them every day. It wasn't like I had put it down too long and lost the thread or whatever. I mean, so that is my one caution is if you're trying to keep them straight and they're too similar, it can almost backfire. With nonfiction, it might not matter, but with storylines, it definitely matters because you have to know who's doing what. So anyway, yeah.
There are no rules and there's not a right way to do it.
Yeah.
I think part of the help in having the lit of 5 per categories, though, is when you do notice that one category is like, oh, I finished that category in February. The 5 is actually a limit to like, I need to read other genres now because I'm, tending toward the obsessive in this category and I need to stop.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Okay. So then it's, what are your categories?
Okay.
Brandy, have you picked categories? Or are you just stacking
I
books
have.
and waiting till they speak to you?
So I decided that, well, I shouldn't say that. I wasn't too specific last year, but I was tempted to at the very beginning. I was looking at my very first iteration of and I was way too specific. And it was, I think sometimes when you get really specific, when you're getting really deep into a subject, sometimes those books are like all really challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can kind of crush yourself. So I backed out and went wide again. And I kind of resorted to a lot of my typical areas that I like to read in, not doing anything super out of the ordinary this year. So I have an education one, which I think will catch some of the stuff we're reading together for podcast shows too. It's not all like I was trying to figure out what categories also can I put my assigned reading.
Right.
Like when I had younger kids and had to pre-read for all of my kids, I always tried to put it into my 5x5. So I wasn't like doing that on top of it. So I have education and my government, econ, politics thing, fiction and literature, health and science. And then I was really, really tempted to put like virtue as one. But I think I've decided to back up and just do my theology, philosophy. Because again, I noticed all my books on virtue are like really huge. Mm-hmm. And it's probably not going to happen. Like that is probably too audacious of a goal just because of how much outside commitments I have that are non-reading commitments. So I think if I do like theology, philosophy, I can fit the virtue books in that I really want to hit. Like I have like Thomas Aquinas, I have an excerpt with a Summa on the virtues. I really want to read it this year, but like, I'm not going to read like the whole Summa because I don't have time for that. So anyway, so those are mine.
Misty, do you have yours?
Yeah. And maybe we should type them after we're done in the chat. So this last year I planned a 5x10 or 2 5x5s to get 50 books and 10 categories, 5 books in 10 categories. And I didn't make it. I think I read 40 books, or it was close. I haven't done my final count yet, but it was really close to 40 books. But having that goal was a good push for me, even though I didn't make it. I appreciated having the different categories, and some of them were really similar. Like I had Marxism, and then I had anti-Marxism as a category. That was a little bit of a sneaky way to get 10 books on that topic in. But one of the things that I've realized is that I really appreciate always having certain categories going.
Yeah.
It kind of keeps the conversation going year over year, because it's not like the connections are done in one year.
Right. Yeah.
So I like to always have a theology category and a history category, an education, and philosophy, and literature. So I have like a standard 5x5. And then the second 5x5 is more like, okay, and this year I'm interested in learning and growing in these other areas. So the first 5x5, right, these are lifelong categories. And then the other one is more just what's current. And when it comes to the end of it, like this last year where I didn't read 50 books and I didn't finish it, you know, theology and philosophy can combine into one, or education and philosophy.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
I still finished a 5x5, but when I'm planning it out, I have those options, and I might not make it to all of them. And so some of those books have just rolled into this next year, where I didn't get to them last year. They're just rolling onto this year's plan. So this year, in addition to my standard 5x5, I have leadership as a topic, alternative economics and politics,
Ooh.
tectonic, and then medieval, because I have a book club that's reading in the medieval time. So that's going to, some of those books, because we're going to read a book a month, like we're going to read Bede's Ecclesiastical History. I put that one in my history category. And then some of them might make it into the literature category, but I have that one to just kind of catch the extras. So,
yeah. I like your wide planning idea, because I feel like that actually leaves room for whim, but within your categories. So like your whim books are still kind of dropping in, but it's like you pulled one from some other place. Yeah. Anyway, I can see how that's really handy. I might do that.
Oh, we don't have to type it in. Haley's doing it for us.
Oh,
thank you, Haley.
Love Haley. Yeah. So mine are, I'm not quite sure yet. I'm still working them out. Tectonic. And I have actually quite a few fun books that I put alternatives, and I put that in the tectonic study as well. More about like getting kids outside and doing things like that. So that's going to be fun, and adventures. But that's never a health and fitness category is something I don't ever have to put on my tectonic, because on my list, is because it's one of my favorite categories to just read. So I often I will read more than 5 books on those kinds of things because it's interesting to me. I'm going to just always have a category called Friends Don't Let Friends Read Alone. And that is for book clubs, online or in person. I'm in a lot of book clubs. So, because that also helps me finish books. But I have quite a few of those that are, and that one always fills out more than 5. But I like to have that because that is a big portion of my reading. So, and then this year or next year, this year, supposedly, we 3 are writing a book about Scully every day. And so I'm having a category that's called Writing a Book, which has the books that we are referencing and some books about writing, because we're also sneak peek going to have a summer school on writing. So that one is kind of Scully Sisters heavy. And I really think that my reading aloud has slipped off this year. And so I am putting a read aloud category on my list so that I personally, I do a lot of reading of school books for my kids, but we're not reading anything fun. And so I want to get back into that. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. Brandy and Misty's are, a little more eggheadish. So I bring it down to the real level of good things. So
I'm trying to decide if I should be offended.
No, you guys are always inspiring to me. And I was like, oh man, maybe I should put some tougher books in here. But this is what I need to be reading. And that's the thing about this challenge that's so unique is that, it's not prescriptive. We are taking an examination of where we need to read things and where we need to push and things like that. Like some of these categories are a challenge for me, but it's not in the same way, maybe intellectually, but it is just for my time and using my, how I'm using my reading time. So,
I was thinking about how one thing that this did for me mentally was that for years and years and years, I was doing all this pre-reading for Amplified Online. And I really felt like between that and the podcast and book club, like I didn't really get to read things that I chose for myself just because I wanted to read them. And I noticed some people talking about pre-reading and I was like, oh, we're in that stage. Like I haven't had to do much pre-reading because I read with my oldest all the way through. And so now I'm like resting on my amazing laurels. No, but I mean, like I don't pick that many new books from child to child. So I just have to read a handful of things, which is very different than what I had to do years ago. But one thing I was thinking was like you introduced the 5x5 when I was in the midst of this and to take all of that and like recategorize it for me, it just made the pre-reading way more satisfying. Like that was one of the things that helped me make the transition between I'm doing this chore that's intruding on my reading to, oh my gosh, I'm getting the education that I always wanted, that my school and my education growing up did not give me, right? And I felt like so taking the obligatory books and categorizing them, I think is just super helpful in making that mental shift because suddenly doing my duty became really a delight because it was like so exciting to see, all these things that I always thought I wanted to read, I get to read. Anyway, for me, it was super helpful just to make that shift. So,
right. So
can I ask this one question here? How would you record a book like the Bible in the 5x5?
I do that every year because I read the whole Bible from September through May, and I usually have a theology, Christian living, or philosophy book, and that just goes right there. And it always feels so good to put like the Bible in May. So yes, that's how I do it. But I mean, you could put it probably anywhere and just count it because it's the Bible. It's the book you need to be reading.
It is a whole book.
Yeah,
it is a whole book. But I think you also, just if you wanted to make it a whole category, could make a category like the Bible and divide it into, there's basic divisions you could do, epistles, gospel. I mean, like, or you could even do individual books. Like if you're going really deep in different books, just picking 5 books. I'm doing. And remembering
wisdom literature,
that a lot of Old Testament books that are split up are actually one book. Like Chronicles is just Chronicles. It's not really 1st and 2nd Chronicles. It's just a thing people did. Anyway. But yeah, there's different ways to do it. Do it the way you want, guys. It's a tool.
Right. It's about thinking about what do I need to remind myself of, do I need to be reminding myself that reading my Bible is reading a book, like it counts, and I need to be finishing, or, my Bible reading's in place already and I'm not reading other things, then, you might just have 2 separate things. Like I have my Bible reading plan and I have my book reading plan.
Yeah.
The 5x5 challenge is a tool to help you track and count what you need to be tracking and counting.
Yep. Good. All right. Best tips. How do we want to do this? Should we go like 1, 1, 1, 1, or just like go 3?
No, you guys go first and then I'll finish.
Okay. I'll start. So my top 3 tips for this, I wrote them down so I don't forget, are stretch yourself, but not too much. So I feel like they're stretching to the point where you're going to break and quit midway because you're so discouraged with what you've done. Like what I was saying with my virtue, just realizing my virtue category, not my actual virtue.
He was just trying too hard to be virtuous.
Right. I'm so virtuous. No. But just like realizing, okay, that is just really what I mean. The big thing is it's going to tempt me to neglect things that I'm supposed to be doing. Right. Like I don't want to challenge myself to the point where I am becoming unvirtuous while I read about virtue. So stretch, but I do think like this is a chance for us to stretch ourselves. That's why it's not just here's my one comfy category and I'm just going to read in this one comfy category forever. Like we're trying to develop intellectually as humans, right? So stretch yourself, but not too much. The second one was choose books you actually want to read. It's not supposed to be a form of punishment. Like I'm assuming that we are choosing categories that we want to be interested in. And then there's good books in those categories, right? Like it doesn't, including children's books. Like, Abby mentioned this, but like some people using children's biography as the doorway to reading history. Honestly, I feel like that happened to me naturally because I'm pre-reading my kids' books for homeschool when they're little, right? And all those things help us develop our taste in these things. So you don't have to jump straight to like the grown-up section. If you're not ready, it's fine. It's fine to read the junior high economics books because all of us had to read. That's where we all got our start. So it's fine.
Well, and then there's like, isn't it John Senior's 1,000 good books, right?
Yeah.
That is a great list to pull from because those are wonderful books for us all to read. And they are, that enculturation, right? All the things we can do.
Yep. And my last tip was rework your plan if life makes the original plan untenable. Like, let's say you made this amazing plan and then you all of a sudden realize next week that you're having a baby in September, right? Like that wasn't, you made the plan, didn't know God had other plans for your life. And I'm not saying you have to rework it right away, but I'm just saying you may have to rework it before it's done. And we've had people ask if they have permission to rework it. You don't need our permission. You really don't, because this is a tool, right? So you can use the tool in a way that actually helps you get the job done, right? Which is, what's the goal? We're learning and growing as humans. So anyway, those are my 3 tips.
Mine are to look at your categories and vary the size and the type of the book within a category. Something like economics, Marxism, all that. That doesn't all have to be nonfiction. Like Abby mentioned, putting Animal Farm in the Marxism category. So you can change up the weight, either like the intellectual weight or maybe even the actual literal weight of the book within the category. I'm looking at the theology books and half of them are on audio and it's like one of them is 50 hours. So if I put that one in there, like the others, there can be 2 of those.
Yeah.
If there's another big one that I would like to read, it has to wait for next year.
Is that like a systematic theology book?
And I often read one systematic theology a year. Some of them are not that long, but the one I want to do next is that long. And so when I look at the rest of the books, I was like, they need to be shorter.
Yeah.
So, one of them is a J.C. Ryle book. So then more practical. And it's only 5 hours on audio. Yeah. So they don't all have to be tomes, although someone I saw had a category called tomes. You have to be careful with that. You can only do so many. And then finding time to read. I think we often overestimate how much time we have to carve out to become readers and to read a significant amount. So find 15 minutes and even use a timer and stop when the timer goes off, at least for the first month or 2 of reading, to see how much you really can read in that amount of time, and to stretch and grow your muscles, your attention, and like eye muscles, sometimes literally. You wouldn't just sign up for a marathon next week and go run it when you haven't run it all. So you have a training program to be able to do it more and more. And it's the same with reading. Starting small doesn't mean continuing small. And starting small doesn't mean that there's any kind of inferiority. You can often make more progress when you start small and just keep it small but daily. So 15 minutes, sometimes I tie that to my morning, like a mother's morning basket kind of time. Pam calls it her peace plan. I do that in the morning. Sometimes I tie it to lunch. I feel like my day's schedules are less consistent than they were when all the kids were little. So it's kind of harder. But when I'm thinking like, oh, I don't know what to do next, it's like I can take 15 minutes and I need to set a timer sometimes so it's not 2 hours. Like I don't, I'm just going to sit and read a little bit. And then next thing I know, there's no dinner.
Right.
The timer can also help for, I'm just going to read 15 minutes and then get up and go do something. And then also pick which books you're reading each week. So you have the plan or the start of a plan for the whole year. But when it's like, well, I'm going to read more this week, but you don't know exactly what you're reading, no reading is going to happen. So every week I write which books I want to make progress in this week. So I might have, I have 50 books picked for this year, and maybe I'm currently in the middle of 8, but I'll list 3 or so. It's like, I want to really pay attention to these books this week. And that just is another level of awareness for like, oh, those are decisions I've already made. I just already have it in my head and written on my plan in front of my face that, I was going to pick that book up. If that's going to happen, maybe that had better be today. That's me.
Okay. So count your things that you're reading, right? Pre-reading, like Brandy said, read alouds, things you listen to as a family, these things count. We do not need to pick up 25 different hard physical books and, that be our only things that we count. We need to count the things that we're reading because that counts. So sometimes, I think shopping our shelves also is one of the best things. Like go and see what you already have. What are the themes? Kind of help that be your guide. But if you can't, ask in sistership. There are so many people who are already asking for recommendations in categories or help with category titles. And, you can name it something fun. Last year I had like kind of pithy themed quotes, and so did Brandy. Like we had song titles or different things like that, to make it fun. Yeah, playlist. Yeah. And that works really well. And the other thing is get some accountability. So I know there's some more questions here in the chat and things like that. And we will get those. We're going to put them in a post, and we will start generating some of those answers and things like that. So I will make sure to get all of those and start putting them in sistership so that the community can help with that and everything. And okay, sorry, I'm having interruptions as usual. So, all right. But for now, when we talk about accountability, reading widely and 25 books this year isn't just going to happen accidentally. Life, relationships, school, work, homemaking. Oh my gosh, Matt. Just 1 second. He's crawling on the floor behind me. Get what you need to get and then leave. Professionalism, yes. Thank you. Oh my goodness. It's every single time in my life. And my kids are not here today. And I'm good. I should have locked the door. I apologize. Okay.
I love you for this.
This is great. The bloopers and outtakes from my family alone would make a whole reel. Okay. All right. So, like I said, back to it. Homemaking and everything, they fill up our days and leave us too tired to read at night, right? Making a plan is so much fun. It's exciting and motivating. And then reality sets in and reading gets pushed aside for the urgent and necessary things, right? We trick ourselves into thinking, oh, it's just easier to take a break and scroll rather than to pick up a book that looked good months ago. Right. So we need a plan for the rest of the year, right? The real life, the real reality of our lives, right? We need accountability and encouragement. And this is why I run the 5x5 accountability group for all Sophies. So when you become a Sophie, you can join the accountability group. And every week, what we do is I write a little post and we set some simple daily and weekly goals, right? Sometimes it's like, I'm going to read this book for 15 minutes and for 5 days this week. And we also share, what we're reading, right? Sometimes it's just a list. Here are my current books. I just started this one. And then we share our wins. Like I have gotten through 3 chapters when I said, my goal was only 1, and the books we finished, right? We share encouragement, simple tips, and habits that help us intentionally read our books. And everyone who completes the challenge and the survey gets, their little finisher pin. But in a lot of the surveys, people talked about how helpful it is to have that weekly accountability. That was one of the things that over and over people were just very thankful for. So if you are someone who needs a little bit more encouragement or accountability, this is a great way to do it, right? Somebody to check in with. And I find that that's super helpful for me, writing it every week. And I often just really exceed my goals and my expectations because I know that there are people out there keeping me accountable. So distractions and the busyness of life can keep us from reaching our goals, right? It's just so easy to put it off our own education and leisure in the name of work. But, burnout and weariness soon follow. Reading and Scully shape and build our intellectual life. Reading helps us be better mothers, wives, friends, and humans. Continuing our own education is essential for the long haul. And we set that example for our own children as lifelong learners. And we build our family and our community's culture by reading widely, thinking deeply, and applying faithfully. Right, that it will take time and intention to read widely, right? And think deeply and do these things, right? And because you're here because you are a reader, or maybe you want to become a reader, or maybe you've just burnt out and want to fall in love with reading again, right? Maybe you are not a finisher, but a failure in the 5x5 challenge. But what we want to tell you is that you can do this. It's just going to take some of your time and effort, right? And so that is why you should become a Sophie and join us in the 5x5 accountability group. So do we have any other things that we need to discuss?
Nope, that's it.
I know we're going to have some. Yep, that's it. So good.
Yep.
So come and join us in Sistership. Post your questions about filling out your categories. Share your categories. It is so much fun to see everyone's books and what they're reading. Kate Myers filled out a satirical 5x5 category post. And it is so funny in Sistership. Did you guys see it?
I haven't seen
it. I'm gonna have to go look.
Okay. It is so fabulous. And it is just about how like a book on cooking and poor life choices and books I have started and have yet to finish for 5 years. And it's so funny. Yeah. And it's so funny. And it was such a great, it was a great post. So I will try to find it, but I just delighted in it this morning when I read it. So enjoy. And and one of the other things that we do in the 5x5 accountability group is that we have quarterly meetups in Zoom where we all get to discuss books. And either some of us will be here, like Brandy sometimes has conflicts and things like that. And she's, yeah. I mean, we all have sometimes. So one of us or two of us will be here, but they are so much fun. and we get to troubleshoot and encourage one another and share our favorite books. I always add to my Amazon cart and my to be read list from those meetings too. So
It's true.
it was always so much fun. So, all right.
So get your form. Don't leave without getting your form. Fill it out and then fill it out and post a picture for us in the accountability group. I like to read them. I get so many book ideas just from reading those posts.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
all right.
Well, thank you everyone for being here and sticking with us this long. Good job.
See you in sistership.
That's right. Have a wonderful weekend.